Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Awaken Empowered podcast. I'm Micheila Sheldan. I'm here with Ethan Fox, and we've been talking a lot in our recent podcasts about the upcoming energies and alluding to astrological influences, and it can all seem a little heavy. We've got a lot going on right now. It's tough to discern. There are some fearful things in our peripheral and a lot of confusion. So in this podcast, we thought we would go there and actually dive deeper into what we think we're staring at in terms of the astrology and how we believe it will be far easier navigated than perhaps some of us will have the occasion to do.
And we're going to do our best to try to present this topic in as easy as a way possible because it can be a little bit of a dark topic. But the thing about cycles is they happen whether we like it or not. And I find, at least in my journey, as having studied and followed astrology for over 30 years now, that it's always been beneficial to see what's coming before it comes, even if it's a difficult phase of my life journey or in the world, because one way or another, the cycle is there for us to have the experience. So there's nothing to do to get rid of it, but we can always navigate it in a more positive way. It's sort of like, if you hurt your foot or something and you're in pain, you can either struggle with that and you can become very overwhelmed and try a million different things to try to fix it, or you can just be in that moment and accept that that pain is there and go on with your life. And that's kind of what we need to do when we go through difficult influences. Now, each of you has a different astrology chart, natal chart, so these influences being more universal may affect you at different degrees. But what we do have coming up is a Saturn Neptune conjunction, and that it's still a little far away right now, but I'm starting to see the early signs in people's individual lives as well as in the global situation that influence is getting stronger. Now, the most intense period of that cycle is going to be in 2025 through middle of 2026. But I think 2024 is going to be the building up to the intensification of that. So next year is going to be especially difficult because I think a lot of things are going to happen on the global scene that is going to build, they're going to ultimately build up to this period of intensity in the end of 2014 through 2015 and part of 2016. And so that Saturn Neptune conjunction will happen in that period of time, and we're leading into that now. And you may be seeing some of the things happening on a global scale and even in your personal lives right now that are sort of hinting at that potential coming in the near future. And then, of course, the very end of that in 2016, Chiron enters Taurus, and that will be the move from, we've been in Chiron and Aries since the end of 2019, 2020, which has been a phase of more anger on the planet. Aries tends to be more self-centered, so people are more angry, they're more self-centered. That's why we've seen a lot of explosion in even the phenomena that happened over the last few years, which is reaction videos, which maybe not all of you know what that is, but reaction videos when somebody, say on YouTube or TikTok or another platform, they watch somebody else's video and just film themselves reacting to that video. So a lot of things that have happened over the last few years, even platforms like TikTok grew really substantially in the last few years. All those things are focused on self and self-centeredness and, identity politics, again, about the self. So all of these things have been happening in this period of time. In 2026, we move into Taurus, which is the next phase, which Taurus, among other things, has to do with money and the financial system. And as I've said before many times, Chiron was in Taurus during the Great Depression. So we are heading into this difficult period. Saturn, Neptune, specifically. Now, as I said, everybody experiences it differently. So this is a global influence. At a very fundamental, basic level, we may see kind of a loss of hope. And because Saturn is the practical, the grounded, the mainstream. Neptune is the lofty ideal or our dreams. So we may feel like there's an inability or a difficulty in reaching our dreams. Now, in everybody's life, on a personal level, it's going to manifest in the areas where you have the greatest need to learn or have an experience or to grow through. And everybody chooses that differently. Some people, it may be health. Other people, it may be um, loss of a loved one. Other people, it may be financial. And of course, with Chiron entering Taurus, I think to a great extent, there's going to be a financial situation that's coming up that is showing us moving toward that with the Saturn Neptune. And that is going to be largely because of everything that's happened in the last few years, but also the central bank digital currency now is actually live in the U.S. as well, in like J.P. Morgan Chase in their business accounts is live. Now, those of you who have business accounts may not even know that it's there because it's just operating in the background. But I think that financial control system will be part of what causes this sort of Great Depressionary period, among other things. So there are a lot of difficult things that are encompassed in this influence, and we'd like to just sort of talk through that just so everybody's prepared and so we can navigate this in as easy a way as possible while still walking the experience that we need to all have, and also observing that this is a global experience, and we are here knowing this information now in order to um, help others who are not so aware of those things. And to some extent, you may not be able to help others because when such an influence occurs, people may just fall into it and not be able to rise out of it. But for those who are able to, knowledge and wisdom like this comes to your awareness and gives you an opportunity to go through it with a in a higher state of being, and where you don't have to suffer and struggle, but you still have the experience anyway, and you can be more like an observer to the experience of your own experience as well as the global, as opposed to being pulled down by it.
We tend to not want to hear these things in the spiritual community because we want to keep our vibration high and we want to make sure that we're creating the right reality. And I think all of those things are extremely important. Yet I also know or have my finger on the pulse, I think, of where we are as a spiritual community. And we've worked really hard to develop the spiritual muscle to be able to look at life through multiple lens and to be able to come to terms with things that are going wrong just as much as focus on the things that we want or we desire to go right in our future. But they say it's always the darkest before the dawn. So we've all gone through our personal experiences with darkness. Many of us, I think even on the planet today, are still in these periods of rebirthing, various aspects of our reality. And it's always so incredibly purposeful. And I know our audience. And so I think it's really important to cover this topic, not only to support ourselves as individuals and to anticipate what's coming for our families, but to remember that we are here as way showers and leaders in ushering in the new earth. And I don't think that comes about extremely easily. Yet, what I've noticed is many of us seem to be getting a taste of these very things that, are beginning to come in our own personal ways. And, I think Neptune even suggests a little bit of idealism, confusion, that sort of thing. And I'm definitely seeing some of that already with people who are considering leaving the entire third dimension conventional reality behind, but still very uncertain as to where they're going in the future and what they're yet to do. And I think that's because it really isn't fully defined just yet. So even with my own work, I'm still contemplating, where is this going in the future and how can I be of service? But until some of these things happen, I think we won't have the clarity that we need to know where our energy is best served and how we can support others. And when we turn our attention to focusing on others, what I believe and what the guides have taught in so many of my courses is that everything will come to us to support ourselves. And that I have found since I've stepped onto this path fully is the more I offer of myself freely and support others in their journey, my life just seems to take care of itself. And it's not, again, like I'm living this elitist life on a yacht in a mansion, but I have everything I need. I live a very comfortable life. And so if we get so wrapped up, I think, in the extremities that are playing out on the planet, whether it comes to ego or it comes to money, we can be led astray. But if we stay in the realm of purpose and service, even if we don't know exactly what that is just yet, I think that's going to be a huge deciding factor in, not having to rise above and not experience some of this. I think we're all going to experience it in our own way, but to have a better experience of what's coming, because we always talk about how we are creators. So we have these astrological influences. We each have a divine plan. I truly believe as a collective, we've carved out our own collective plan, and that's just a vibrational wave that's pushing us through various experiences that are here to help us evolve. There's a lot of wiggle room in those experiences, dimensionally and vibrationally, for us to personally choose. And I think that's going to be the important thing to keep in mind, is that in a time of great restriction, we do have a lot of freedom and a lot of choice, not only in how we perceive what's happening to us and in the world, but how we choose to navigate it as well.
Yeah, and to go further into Saturn Neptune a bit, because Micheila mentioned idealism, and Neptune is the ideal. So I think because it's the planet Saturn is the one that's moving faster and approaching Neptune, I think what we'll see globally, not just in the United States or people, areas where people are watching this video or listening to this podcast, but globally we're going to see, because Saturn can represent our existing structures in society, the governments, the world leaders, and so on. I think we're going to see a greater level of restriction and control that is put into place over the next year that will usher in this period of difficulty. So it's in a manner of speaking, it's kind of like we're living this. I know that life may not feel very ideal to most people right now, but it's more ideal than it will be in a year. And so we may feel this pressure of more restrictions causing us to take away from us what we feel is ideal. And this is also expressed in our personal lives. For example, as Micheila is saying, a lot of people are wanting to leave their conventional careers or life paths in favor of something that's more ideal, or their dream life, or a life mission or soul's mission. That's basically a personal dynamic, how it can show up in our personal lives when Saturn and Neptune are in a conjunction. So because we may want to leave the Saturn, our practical, everyday, accepted life, to move toward a spiritual or higher purpose life. But because these planets are in a conjunction, those kinds of things are things people are going to be thinking about. And it's largely because world events may dictate that what you've been doing before doesn't work anymore. And as a result, a lot of people, I think, in the world may be pushed toward following their dreams. But meanwhile, because it's a conjunction between these two planets, it won't be easy for most people. They may feel like the circumstances are difficult to pursue their dreams. But meanwhile, following the conventional isn't working either, because the conventional may offer too many restrictions and limitations in your life. I see this in many other countries where as opposed to the U.S. is not as bad as some other countries like China or Sri Lanka or many others, where people are struggling to a greater extent, where the conventional economy has collapsed or is in collapse, and a lot of people, their jobs that they had or career paths that were going great a few years ago have completely evaporated. and suddenly they have nothing to do, no money, and I think a lot of those people they're already starting to experience is their conventional lives no longer work. The kind of things that everyone thought was the right thing to do, that society would have told you a few years ago, this is the right path to follow, is not going to work anymore. And many people, I think, as a result, are going to pursue something that's completely outside of the box. But meanwhile, because of that conjunction, it will be a difficult journey to get there. So that's something to keep in mind, is that you may, and the world as a whole, may start to pursue those ideals, but it'll be a challenge in the meantime. So we just have to keep in mind that we really need to get to 2026, 27 before whatever ideals you pursue will start to move more smoothly. Now, in your own individual cycles, maybe you were born with certain influences that would make it easier for you than someone else. But so I'm speaking more on a global level right now. Um, and I think we can talk about this a little bit too, which is I think that right now is Chiron is in Aries, which is a very self-centered influence, and so a lot of people out in the world are doing things very much focused on self. And during a Chiron Aries period, maybe that will work to some degree. But when we move out of that, we're going to see a move away from that. I think, as an example, platforms like TikTok will start to lose their following in when we move into Chiron and Taurus, because that self-centeredness influence will move away. So identity politics will also start to fade away. We'll see the fading away of platforms that are more focused on self, or self-centeredness, things like that. Um, and really, if you want to go into a future where you're pursuing something that's maybe more aspirational and not conventional mainstream, keep in mind that in my years in business and also in the spiritual space, what I've concluded is that when you're doing something that you enjoy, that you're really extraordinarily good at doing, that other people want and need, you will always be in demand, even in a depression. And the problem I see with a lot of people is they're trying to carbon copy everybody else instead of trying to be something that's authentic to them. For example, maybe you're an extraordinary artist, and it's something you love doing, and you put your art out there and people actually buy it. That's how you know if somebody wants it and needs it. If you're a great artist but you put it out there and nobody's buying it, or you can't make a living doing that, as we're going into this period, then that may not be the area where you should focus. And it may be better to find some variation of that, or maybe something entirely different. If, for example, uh, you love growing food, and maybe becoming a farmer might be something that would be beneficial, because other people will need food, and we are going to see a lot of restrictions already we're seeing in the food arena. But maybe you would be that person who goes out and starts your own farm, or maybe even a garden in your own space to grow food for other people. Or maybe you love working with children, and I think a lot of parents need to pull their kids out of school, because it's going to only become more dystopian and the kids are just being brainwashed in that system. But maybe you could start your own education pod, or school in your area, maybe even out of your home for your local community. And that could be a way you get through this period of time, something you're really good at that other people need, that they're willing to pay you for, even in a depressionary environment. So we need to look at those kinds of things, discover what we're uniquely qualified to do, that we're good at doing, that we love doing, and also something that feeds our mission, whatever that is. And if we do that, I think you can ride out even the most depressionary periods. But I think a lot of the problem that I see with a lot of the world today is people are so focused on themselves that they don't actually consider what other people actually want and need, that they're good at doing. And so when you do that, you may not be able to produce something out in the world that benefits society, that benefits humanity, that also will take care of your needs so that you can live a full life as well.
I think it's really interesting that we have this focus on self and Chiron and Aries right before we go into this depressionary period where we are going to need each other so much more. It's kind of like the universe has this interesting plan of taking us all to the extreme of ego and then breaking that down to say, we need to now look out for each other. And I think that's going to be one of the benefits that kind of comes out of that, even though it might feel turbulent and difficult, because that's what we want. Going into the fifth dimension, we all talk about unity consciousness, but I think that it's hard to get a grasp on a really grounded understanding of what that looks like. And exactly what you're saying is what that looks like. And as a matter of fact, I watched a video just recently. You're talking about teachers, where a lot of parents have decided to bring their kids out of the conventional school system, but they don't feel qualified, or they feel a little overwhelmed by schooling them themselves, and are looking to privately school. It's a new thing, private schooling, where they're hiring teachers to come in, even if just for a couple hours a week, which is really all that's needed to train their kids in certain subjects. So I think if you were a teacher right now, for example, you just have this golden opportunity to exit the system and start your own thing in your own area. But I can validate what you're saying about how things will fall apart. And if you followed my work, the guys are talking about the third dimension is just disintegrating, collapsing upon itself. We can put a lot of blame on all the elites and the people who are doing all of the stuff, but ultimately it has to fail. So that's why things are getting so uncomfortable. But in my private sessions, what I've noticed is people ask a lot of questions about, the future and, where are they going? And a lot of people who are in conventional positions of work, the guides have alluded that they're going to end up getting kind of pushed out of those positions, and things are not going to stay together in terms of corporate entities and things like this. And that can be a difficult message to deliver, but I think we're seeing it already. I can't even tell you how many medical professionals in the last 3 years who have come to me as clients. I had this slew during the pandemic of doctors nurses who were awakening to things that they had never considered before because of the situations that they were asked to be, put in. And they are now leading the way. They don't know it yet in terms of, right, what I think is new earth longevity, or, pulling people out of that old system and creating a bridge. The guides use that term a lot. We're going to walk a lot of bridges. Things aren't going to be the exact end all be all of what the fifth dimension requires, but we're gradually walking and getting there. So some of us are those bridges, right now in our own way, even if we still find ourselves in conventional arenas. So I had a client this past week who had that exact question, still in a conventional job, is going through this huge awakening, having all these incredible experiences, has no idea where to take it or what to do. And the guides say, if you're still there, it's purposeful, because there's either something that you're learning, an experience you're gaining, or something that you're offering to others around you that's extremely important in this evolutionary process. So I think the timing of it isn't always our own. And obviously we know things are going to happen that we don't really enjoy or desire, but we have to remember there's an intelligence to it all. And there's divine time as well to account for. As spiritual beings, we intuit a lot, we know things before they're going to happen. And I think that gets us sometimes, because it's easy to sense into where you think you need to go and what you believe you should be doing. And then every day between here and there, criticize yourself for not being there yet. And that's often what takes us off path. And I think we have to be really careful about that, especially in the spiritual community, because if these times are coming and we aren't fully attuned yet to how we can serve the masses, we're going to have to be really present and really physically grounded and aware of all of these things as they're happening, such that we can make a personal connection to them that's really meaningful. So I think it starts in our own life, right? And then it expands out to our service and to the collective.
The thing we need to keep in mind with Saturn Neptune conjunctions is the two influences are trying to work together. So, but meanwhile, they're very different influences. And the astrology that I talk about here, there are many different ways to interpret. So some of you who may be astrologers may have a different viewpoint, but I use astrology in more of a practical, grounded way because of my background in more grounded things. I try to integrate that into everyday life and into the global macro picture as well. And from that standpoint, I can relate a lot of world events to what's happening with the cycles. Now, when we have Saturn and Neptune in a conjunction, ultimately what we need to do by the end of that influence is to integrate the practical and the grounded with the higher lofty ideas, which may for some people be to leave their mainstream careers and pursue something that's more meaningful or idealistic. But initially, it'll be hard to make those two things work together. But ultimately, as I said earlier, if you're doing something that is unique to you, that you're very good at doing, that other people love, you'll succeed. Just because those are good ways to evaluate what you're here to do in this world, and whatever that is, Source will support. So now there are also many things happening in the world right now that are happening currently or coming up in the near future that I know a lot of people are concerned about. I see conversations going and people are sending me messages asking about these different situations as well. I think that's something we should address as well, so that because I think a lot more of that's going to happen in the next couple of years. And if we um, pursue it in a more mature, level-headed way, we'll be able to navigate through those things and make better decisions and not struggle so much.
It's definitely an advantage that we have so much information at our fingertips. At the same time, we have to keep in mind that the really good information is being censored from us, so it's harder and harder to, get the real scoop on anything. But for example, I think this video will come out after the announcement that FEMA is going to be beaming its signal to all of the phones, and we've had a lot of concern about that and discussion about it in my inner circle community. I've also had some direct messages about it, and these are the things that are going to come up that I think we're going to have to discern and try to hold the peace and work out for ourselves. And for me, when I see these things, I look at them through a multi-dimensional lens, and I think, well, first of all, we know FEMA is not going to do us any favors. All right. So if something's happening to our phones that day, it goes right along with all of the agendas we've been talking about, whether it's social credit or CBDC and all that stuff. Do I think they're trying to wipe out the entire human population or, take down those who have been vaccinated? Maybe. But I always step back and think, if they were going to do something like that, would we know about it? And can we trust the people who are bringing this information to the surface? And so for me, I look at recent events in Lahaina, for example. We never knew that was coming. It was a huge surprise. At the same time, now we, with hindsight, we can look back and say, well, certainly the signs were there. And that's the keen type of observation that I think we're going to need going into this period, trying not to get so wrapped up in the fear of what everyone is predicting and look beyond those really big announcements to what's actually subtle and being hidden. And that will give us more, of a landscape to better understand, right? To navigate in a very simplistic way, I think, because ultimately, if these things are going to continue to happen, as individuals, we can feel very hopeless and helpless, which I think what, this astrology shows is that's going to be a part of our collective experience. But individually, I think we need to stay in total neutrality and just do the things that are necessary. So if we're unsure about what's going to happen to our phone, just mark it on the calendar, put it in a Faraday cage for the day, and move on, as opposed to giving all of it so much attention and energy. Because we've discussed this in past podcasts. That is the ultimate goal, is to deplete us of energy and to guide our attention to things that hold us back from freedom and ultimately living the lives that we desire. So I think that's going to be a huge consideration in the spiritual community, especially, looking at all of the insights from others and stepping back and taking what resonates with us and putting it into some type of rational interpretation that we can do something about in the physical plane.
Using Hawaii as an example and the events that took place there, a lot of the people who survived that say that they ignored what the government told them to do. So they did the opposite because the government was putting people in harm's way. So should we trust anything that comes out of FEMA? Absolutely not. At least I wouldn't. I think these institutions and our government are all exist for their own purposes and their own benefit and to the detriment of the rest of humanity. We're living in a world where all those things are coming to their extremes. And so anything that comes out of any government agency or official or world leader, I don't think should be trusted. Even, a lot of people are still very idealistic of Elon Musk, but you have to understand that majority of the money that he makes in these various companies that he owns are from military contracts. So he can say nice things because it makes him look good on social media, and maybe to some extent he even believes the things he says. But I always say, look at what a person is doing. And a lot of his money comes from military contracts and oppressing the people, meanwhile appearing as if he is a savior of all the people. So we should have a healthy skepticism of any of our world leaders and government institutions at this point. So from that standpoint, I would not trust anything that is coming out of FEMA. But that having been said, the individuals out there who are spreading these messages about some sort of frequency that's going to activate nanoparticles in the vaccine of everybody who's been vaccinated. And is that true? Maybe, but I would doubt that that's true. I think more likely the FEMA, which this is not the first time they've done this sort of alert test. They've done this, I think, every couple of years for the last few years at least. So this is not a brand new test. So from that standpoint, it isn't new. But of course, a couple of years ago, we didn't have as many vaccinated people on the planet either. So will it impact them? I don't know. But I take the impression of, well, I don't trust FEMA anyway. So regardless of what it's going to do, if there's some sort of adverse frequency that's built into the tone that they're putting out on everybody's phones, I'll just put my phone inside of a shielded Faraday pouch. So, and if for those of you who can't afford one, maybe you can just get Faraday fabric online for very inexpensive, and put your phone in that or in some sort of a shielded metal container, but it would have to be certain kinds of metal. But you can get Faraday fabric for a very inexpensive price and just keep your phone off for that period of time. I think primarily it's probably to as a means of tracking and positioning everyone to make sure that we're all receiving their notifications, because over the next few years they'll probably use that as a tool to direct people's behaviors in certain directions and in certain areas. Maybe even like in Hawaii, where they sent people back into the fires. They may do that using alert systems and things like that. Who knows? But as a general rule, I don't trust anything that comes out of government these days. So I pretty much do the opposite of what they say. And not being in a state of fear or anything, it's just a matter of convenience. My phone won't be working that day. So now, with regard to people who are saying these things, now I'm somebody who I used to interview a lot of people in this spiritual and alternative space for many years. And one thing that I realize is that everybody has a secret informant that's telling them things that are very mysterious that never has come true. So in all the years that I've had shows, I've heard guests that I had on my shows tell me that in the next month or two, all of the white hats are going to take down all of the people in government who are doing nefarious things. And we're going to be living in this free society by 2 months from now. And it never happened. And of course, then the last few years happened and everything became even more dystopian, and world leaders took even more control. So there was that. And of course, I've had a lot of people on my shows in years past who were talking about how the gold reserves of the world were going to be released to the rest of the population, and we're all going to be millionaires, and we're going to have prosperity on the planet. And that didn't happen. So now some of these people who you're listening to may be well-meaning. Maybe they have genuine positive interest, but they're being misinformed by other people who they're listening to, and being told things that they're just telling everybody else, and it may be wrong. Or maybe they are actually part of the system that's trying to misinform and confuse everybody. Both scenarios could be possible. So I think you have to use a bit of discernment during this time, especially in the years we're going into, because, the whole misinformation and disinformation narrative, which has replaced the old conspiracy theory narrative, which the CIA came up with. I think we'll find in 20 years from now, we'll look back and we'll realize, the CIA came up with disinformation and misinformation and all these terminologies so that they could put out the disinformation and misinformation. Meanwhile, those of us who are speaking truth are censored from speaking under the guise of misinformation. So we have to be very careful in this period we're going into, because I think it's going to be very hard to discern what is true and what's not. And we're going to be put under more pressure to make decisions in the direction that the mainstream governmental systems and world leaders want us to do. So that pressure may increase. And meanwhile, the dissenting voices will be suppressed. And so it'll be hard to know what is true and what's not, and what sort of decisions to make. So you have to work a little bit harder to evaluate what you're being told, and to see if these are people you should really trust or put your faith in. And my rule of thumb is generally distrust anything that comes out of the government over the next couple of years at least. Really, that may be a good thing to have while we're still in the third dimension anyway. But definitely over the next couple of few years, and till the end of 2030, I think we're in this pressure cooker. And of course, as I mentioned in the last channel Revelations, over the last the World Health Organization and the United Nations as an example, which are institutions who are supposed to be working for the betterment of humanity, but clearly are not, have said that they're going to accelerate the Agenda 2030 between now and the next 2 years, which would fit the Saturn Neptune that's coming up, which means that they're going to increase or accelerate their agendas, which is what's going to bring about this period of difficulty in the world. So we have to be very careful what we're hearing from the mainstream news, from our governments, and even just everyday people we may follow on social media. They may have their own agendas, or they may just be well-meaning people who are misinformed. And so we have to make decisions with a bit more of a level head, and evaluate these things, evaluate the person who's telling you those things, because anybody can say good things on social media or in the media in general, but are those people living the kind of lives that would align with somebody who you'd want to put your faith in and belief in? And ultimately, we are our own power. So if there's one thing we've been consistent about on our shows and Channel Revelations, the guides as well, is that the Savior is us. We are the ones who have to step up and save ourselves and create a better world. We can't wait for the white hats in the world and government who are going to save us from all of the people who are causing the problems. We are those white hats, and we are going to have to take responsibility to create that better world for ourselves and for our children and future generations.
In the last podcast, we talked about taking back your power having to do with physical health. And I think an important thing to keep in mind as we go through this period is we are leaving hierarchies behind. And I know that's such a hard thing to unwind in us because we're so used to living in a hierarchical society, but especially in the conscious and spiritual community, this is a great rule of thumb to always consider in terms of discernment. And I see it a lot, we have people who claim they're the next ambassador of the New Earth 5D movement, and they are the ones who are making the new rules and behind the scenes have all the information and are keeping us out of the next galactic war. And while that sounds amazing, we have to realize it's all a trap. Because if we get wound up in those stories, we lose every bit of our power and we forget that we're all contributing to the collective and where we are heading. It's really just a distraction. So any time that I see someone with a really big following, who's making claims about, what's coming or not, or something has happened and it's already made a big impact on the future, I'm cautious because I know we're on this trajectory and this progression together. And if someone is making a claim that is so extreme as to us not having any contribution, that it really can't be true. I mean, even from an astrological perspective, we know that we're going to sway that timeline based upon the choices we make. We say that all of the time, even though the influence will still be there. It might be difficult. It might feel depressing. We might be confused at times. We are all individually going to attune the frequency through which we experience that. So that's why I think it's so important for us to have a bird's eye view and a very clear perspective of everything that we're bringing into our reality. Now, I'm someone who does a lot of research. I have my favorite accounts and people that I follow. I don't take everything that they say to heart. I take bits and pieces, and then I step back and I draw my own conclusions. I make my own decisions. And some of that comes together with the channeling. So we all are stepping into this period where we want to use our internal guidance. And we touched on that last time. How do we know that the guidance is true? Well, what I find is it's typically the simplest path or the simplest answer. It's not complex. So if you're following someone or something and there's a lot of complexity to it, there's a lot of spiritual words that you don't understand, there's a lot of things going on that requires you to do certain things in order to create the reality you desire, that for me is a red flag, right? It's just leading us down the wrong path because, as I said in the last podcast, I think the fifth dimension is calling for ease and simplicity. And that's why I think moving through these times, as difficult as they might be, are purposeful in us breaking down all of the stuff that's held us back, the complexity of the third dimension, all the requirements, the things we have to follow, the limiting beliefs that have been programmed within us. None of it can go with us. So if we're looking at something new, something spiritual or in the conscious movement that is disguised as something in the third dimension, just with a polished kind of, sparkly perception, that to me is always a red flag.
Yeah, the guides in many of the channel revelations have talked about how essentially to disengage from the things in society that are not beneficial. So I think that's what we're going to have to do in the next couple of years and be prepared right now mentally and emotionally for that outcome. For example, how are you going to deal with if everything locks down again and they start requiring vaccinations or wearing masks? Are you going to go along with that? Because the more If nobody complied with any of these things in the last few years, none of this would have happened. And this escalation wouldn't have occurred. The more compliance they get, the more they push further. So we're going to see that in the next few years, especially. So how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to deal with if there's a central bank digital currency and you have to get it for whatever reason, maybe to get a driver's license, or how are you going to deal with if you have to do a biometric scan and iris scan and fingerprinted just to get a driver's license in your area, or whatever you need to do in your area? How are you going to deal with that? Are you going to go along with those things? Or even on a more subtle level, something that we've personally experienced is a lot of censorship over the last few years. And I watch a lot of YouTube videos and read a lot of books, and one thing that I've noticed is a lot of YouTubers have just gone along with it. They've self-censored. So last few years, so many people have self-censored because it's the only way they can keep their content online and not be suppressed. And in the process, we've given these world leaders and CEOs of large companies like YouTube and Google permission to continue to censor. Now, I've taken a different approach, and of course, the repercussions of that is, well, our videos have been deleted, and we've been kicked out of venues, and police have showed up at our events, but we've stayed consistent, even regardless of that, and refuse to self-censor. And yeah, there are consequences of that. But if everybody did that, then censorship would go away, because these platforms wouldn't be able to get people to self-censor. Ultimately, we are the ones who are doing this to ourselves. They may be doing certain things to impose restrictions, but ultimately we are always the ones that have complied with these things and have allowed for it. I talk a lot about taxes. We are the ones who tax ourselves, because ultimately the government can say whatever they want to say, and they can say you're required to do this. Mask wearing is mandatory, for example, or mandatory vaccines. But ultimately, there is no such requirement. We are all self-empowered human beings. But what we do as human beings is we give that power away to an authority, or to someone else, or to someone we look up to, and we expect them to save us. And that's where we make the mistake, and where we give away our power, and then we become obligated by those decisions. So if we give away our power to a government and we agree to pay our taxes, that is not the government imposing it on us. They simply asked us in a way that seemed like a demand, and we just gave away our power. But if we choose not to, then those things never come into being. So ultimately, all human enslavement is self-imposed. We are the ones who gave away our power, our own connection to source, to others. We do this all the time. There's all this talk going about Russell Brand these days, where everybody's in an uproar about this, and it's just drama to keep us distracted. I mean, ultimately, is he right or wrong in this situation? Everybody's concerned about it. Meanwhile, there are actually important things happening in the world that nobody's paying attention to. And so I often wonder, does an individual like that get to that level of influence because he's a good guy, or maybe he was helped to get there, and maybe this is just a distraction? And secondly, just if we look at the character of this individual, is this the kind of individual who we want to look up to or to worship in some way? It's a meaningless thing that none of us need to get involved in. But ultimately, we are in many small ways giving away our power to all of these people and to all of these institutions. And that's where I think going forward into the future, we're going to see that escalating to where the institutions and world leaders and many others are going to forcefully try even harder to impose more restrictions on us. But in the end, none of it's required. In the end, we are the ones who are going to permit these things. And just like we did the last few years, we're the ones who are going to agree. And in our agreement, we give away our connection to source to someone else outside of us. And we give them permission to impose these restrictions on us. So I think that's one thing to be aware of as we're going into this future. A lot of people under these influences are going to give away their power and are going to live very miserable, difficult lives. But we don't have to do that. And my hope is that this period of time is going to force people to start stepping outside of these systems and to live a more self-empowered life and to reconnect to source and realize that we don't really need to depend on others like the government or institutions or world leaders for our happiness and to live fulfilling lives. So just sort of work that out right now before we go into this time, how you're going to deal with these circumstances if they do happen. You know, if we knew prior to 2020 what was coming, that we were going to have these vaccination and mask requirements, and we had enough time to prepare mentally and emotionally for this outcome that was coming, would as many people have fallen into it? I don't think so. But you know, you never know under pressure what people will do. I think a lot of us today there's so much fear on the planet that people are very easily controlled, and ultimately that's I think the problem. If we didn't give in to those fears, doesn't mean you can't have fears, but doesn't mean but giving in to fears is different from having fears. If we didn't give in to those things, then we would have no slavery on the planet today. We would have no governments wouldn't be as big as they are. They wouldn't control the people to the degree that they do. So fear is really an essential component, and distraction, and all those things are very prevalent in society today.
If there's anything that's made a really big impact on me in watching the channeled revelation shows and now looking through that lens at the world, it's the whole savior and idol mentality that we have, which is, I never realized, even though I knew, I never realized just how much it truly runs our world. And it's really not just government. I want to take this into the spiritual community and even people out there who I know have really big missions and really big roles here in the world. It's we've been trained that in order to succeed, we have to become those idols, or we have to become those saviors with the really big following and the popularity and all of that. And so there are a lot of criteria and things that get put in the way of us actually doing things that matter. So if we get on that path of trying to serve through these very restrictive ideals, I think we're going to waste a lot of time. We're going to waste a lot of energy. I just did a post today actually about, stepping back from social media and all the fancy reels and taking a breath and realizing how much energy, time, and attention we're putting into what other people are doing and what other people are here to teach, and really just creating that content, which is his only purpose is for that reason, for idol worship, or for money. And it's not that those things aren't important. Maybe there are souls that come in that are meant to have those experiences, but I literally think this stuff is being put in place as one of the biggest distractions for us, whether we're worshiping someone else or we're trying to be worshiped ourselves. We're not really getting to the authenticity of our work and what we're here to do. But I also want to mention, what you're talking about with fear and really going into this next period. I don't think we need to know everything. And that's where a lot of us get stuck. And I think we're trying to figure it out is, what are they going to do next? And what do we need to prepare for? And some of it we can't. We have no idea how a lot of this is going to manifest for us. But drawing those hard and fast lines as to what your boundaries are, I think that is the most important thing. So going into this next pandemic period, this winter or whatever is coming, I learned through the previous winter and couple of years, right? What are my boundaries? What am I willing to do and not willing to do? And if you stick to those things, even in the most challenging circumstances, I think you will feel so empowered and see the ease that the universe is providing, because as I mentioned, always, it's the illusion of no choice. So I think what happens when we get so disconnected from ourselves and always looking out at what other people are saying and doing, is we kind of lose that faith and confidence that we will make it work, even if it seems completely impossible. And I know many people did. You and I made it work. We held our ground, we held our boundaries. We didn't have to get involved in uncomfortable situations, and our lives actually got better. So I think this is something to really keep in mind over the next several years, is you don't have to know, because we can't know it all. We can't possibly prepare for everything that we're going to be faced with and challenged by. But if we know ourselves to the degree that there are just some things we're not willing to do, when those challenges arise and we don't do them, we will find the paths that carry us around them, even if it takes a little while, because ultimately that's the purpose, right? I mean, I think that these restrictive times are coming to prove to us that we are the sovereign beings we have been taught and learned that we are. We're learning how to literally put it into physical practice in real life circumstances, right? It's kind of like training for a marathon. It's not comfortable, right? You might have a trainer that's forcing you to run up and down a city block of stairs, I don't know, 20 times a day to make it through that marathon. And it really stinks, but you do it and you become stronger. And that's what I think this is about. It's kind of like training for a marathon. We don't know what it's going to be like. We don't know what the weather conditions are going to be, but all we can do is have our boundaries and be ready, and know that internally know that we can manage anything. We can face anything that comes our way. They're going to make it look, I think, far more difficult than what it is. And that's always the case, right? The level of difficulty, the level of complexity that the third dimension and those in power are putting in our life is so purposeful. So we are the only ones who can bring the simplicity to that complexity.
The most important thing that I think out of, or at least to me, that you're talking about channel revelations, that I think we're coming to on the planet today, is idol worship, really. And that idea that it's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
At least 13,000 years, maybe as far back as the Anunnaki, maybe even farther back than that. But it is something that's ingrained in us for thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. I don't know. That desire to seek source outside of ourselves, to worship those outside of ourselves, and it's obviously very prevalent today in our various religions. And in every aspect of society, there are either people who follow a religious figure or a particular religion, or the Pope, or satanic worship. I mean, it's prevalent in every aspect of society, or even people who are atheists who believe in certain philosophies, or certain people who worship certain communities. It's all worship of outside of ourselves, or even worship of Elon Musk, or worship of various world leaders, or even worship of CEOs of companies. It's so prevalent and ingrained in our society. By that, I'm not saying that you can't look at somebody who's doing extraordinary work in a particular area and appreciate that work, or even look up to them in that sense. But when you put that power in that person to create your reality and to take care of you, that's where the problem comes. Like the last few years, as a global society, we put the power of our well-being and health in the hands of our world leaders and medical institutions, and they abuse that power. Of course, that was their intention all along, but that's where the problem is. There's nothing wrong with looking to others, maybe it's a doctor or whoever you go to, or even a holistic health practitioner, and appreciating them for their talents or their abilities to do certain things that you can't do. Or even buying a piece of art, and that artist is really talented and something that you can't do, or that you're not particularly interested in doing. You can appreciate that creation that person is able to make, or even that person for having that talent. But when you look at that person as the means to your happiness or your fulfillment or your connection to source is where the problem is. And this is, in my opinion, the one and only main thing that is causing all the suffering and hardship in society. If that wasn't there, we wouldn't have world leaders abusing humanity, and we wouldn't have politicians or CEOs of corporations or Google or whatever abusing society, because we would not empower them to be in a position to be able to do that to us. That's what has to change in society going forward if we're going to see a better world. I think that's possible, and maybe those ideas are because so many more people now are becoming disenchanted with their world leaders and disenchanted with Hollywood celebrities, because a lot of them pushed so hard in the last few years that they revealed themselves for who they really are. And as a result, I think a lot of people now, more so than prior to the 2020s, a lot of people now see that more clearly and see what the true intentions are of a lot of these people we looked up to and idolized or worshipped in previous times. And we're coming to see that they really are not the saviors we thought they were. It's sort of like appreciating Jesus for the man that he was and what he taught humanity versus the religion that became Christianity. The Jesus that lived, that taught humanity and that healed humanity, did not want to be worshipped. He was not trying to be worshipped. He was just simply following his mission and his purpose to serve humanity in the way that he did. But then it became a religion where now people worship Jesus as this man who is going to save them from whatever it is that they want to be saved from. So that's the difference that we need to discern in society and in our interaction with other human beings, to appreciate each other for what we can contribute and what we can do for each other and to make the world better, but not worship each other for those things. And that hopefully will change in the future. And as it does, I think we'll head into a more fifth dimensional consciousness.
Yeah, a lot of people worship the ascended masters, and they are unconditional love. So we should have a beautiful relationship with these beings. At the same time, what I've found in my connection with them is they're very human. They lived very human lives. Even though they were trained differently than us, they may have been more spiritually oriented and initiated at a young age, and have access to some of their gifts and abilities that we didn't know about till later in life. They struggled. I've had them tell stories both during channel transmissions as well as in my writings and to me personally about times that they were afraid. But I think the big difference is they are able to acknowledge that in a very honest and direct way. And that's where we get tripped up with some of this idol worship, or even attempting to succeed through that model, is we're hiding the truth of who we are and we're not being vulnerable. What we brought forth, and I think it was the last or the one before Channeled Revelation show, is that emotion is everything, for us. So to imagine that an ascended master or a savior would not have had any experience with emotion, I think is taking away their humanness and really taking away a part of us, and a part of them that exists within us that is so special.
You're talking about ascended masters and being human and having emotions. That's something that I don't think we attribute to people like Jesus, for example. We think that he walked on water and did no wrong, but he seems to have had emotions. He was angry at times with certain people, and I would imagine even a lot of the stories you tell me about Mary and her life, and it's apparent in the new book that you're writing about her life journey. She also struggled a lot with a lot of health problems, I think, right? Also. And so her life was very difficult, and she experienced turbulent emotions. So these are regular people, maybe a bit more spiritually advanced than the average, who are living human lives and dealing with human things. So, you can be an ascended master and be a regular person and have regular person things. We can have relationship problems and financial problems and arguments and things like that and still be an ascended master. So we have to be conscious of when we're worshiping other people like that maybe they're extraordinary in certain ways, and certainly we can appreciate them for that and learn from them for that, and maybe even look up to them. But at a certain point, when we move beyond that, we expect them to be the giver of our source, or the giver of our freedom, or to be our savior, is where we lose touch with ourselves, and that's at that point we disempower ourselves and we create more suffering in our own lives. So hopefully we help to clear up this topic a little bit and prepare you a bit more for what's ahead in the road ahead next few years. And so we'll stop there for now, and we'll continue next time with another Channel Revelations. So thank you all for joining us again. We'll be back in another week with Channel Revelations, and we'll continue that conversation further as well. If you are seeing ads on this video on YouTube or any other platform, you can also listen to us in various podcasts like Spotify or Apple Podcasts as well, or Rumble. And we'll be introducing this into many other platforms in the future also. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.